Are you ready to break free from a conventional life and achieve financial independence through your version of tiny living, but you're feeling stuck trying to figure out the money part? Does the pressure to conform to societal norms make it even more difficult to embrace an unconventional lifestyle? Well, you're in the right place. I'm Laura Lynch, host of the Less House, More Moolah podcast, where every Thursday I'll bring you captivating interviews with individuals who have successfully made the transition to tiny living. They defied expectations and are thriving in their unique lives. We'll also dive deep into industry resources to address common financial concerns on your tiny journey. Together, we'll explore the emotional and practical aspects of pursuing an alternative lifestyle. I will describe a clear framework for project planning and cash flow management. Our goal is to intentionally build financial security and make a positive impact through our alternative American dream. So gear up for an exciting and empowering journey to create a life that truly resonates with you. Let's dive into today's episode and take the first steps towards financial independence and purpose through tiny living. Sara Young, thank you so much for coming on Less House, More Moolah. We are today really celebrating Giving Tuesday, which is something that you and I connected on. For listeners, Sara and I are both financial planners. We were at a super nerdy conference back a number of months ago, and all of a sudden we realized that we both think that money should be potentially used to create impact in the world. And so, sort of navigating that and figuring out how to do that in alignment with yourself is really important. And as we're creeping up on Giving Tuesday, I wanted to have Sara come on to talk about sort of the framework of figuring out how to give some of your money, time, effort, talent away, and how to do that really effectively. So Sara is with Live and Give Financial. So Sara, thank you for being here today. We're going to talk through all the nitty-gritty, nerdy details of this sort of joint passion of ours.
Laura, thank you so much for having me. I am so thrilled to be here. As you said, I was so excited to get to meet you and connect about some of our shared values, things that we hold near and dear to our heart, and getting to discuss this in more detail ahead of Giving Tuesday, which feels almost like a holiday in and of itself here at the end of the year. I'm just very grateful for you and everything you're doing for the tiny living community, and for the advisor world in general. So thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So Sara, tell us a little bit more about your background and what you've recently, transitioned in your life, and just give us a little story of kind of where you are in your aligning your life with your values.
Sure. So I recently, as you said, launched my firm, Live and Give Financial. And one of the biggest motivators for that was to have more control of my time. I was on a career trajectory with a lot of very high salary potential, which for many intents and purposes, the world would say is what we're striving for. But really, my heart has always been that you can't buy more time. My dad passed when he was 35. And in March of this year, I turned 35. So I'm sort of facing my own mortality. And money, like I said, money can't buy time. It's very precious. So my husband and I, we are very intentional about living to maximize our time and our life experiences, making smart financial decisions, but not really focusing on what the dollars, just accumulating dollars in the bank. So for a number of years, I worked an 8 to 5, and I really enjoyed my role in my career, and what I was doing there, but I just didn't really have a lot of time to be giving back to my community, my wider community, my smaller, like my friends, my family. And that was really hard for me. So one of the decision points was, how can we make this different between, I have little kids. So between the nonstop daycare, colds and illnesses, and two demanding careers between my husband and I, we were always the one asking for favors and never feeling like we could give back in any sort of meaningful way. And that was really challenging. So we have intentionally kept our lifestyle fairly tiny. Disclaimer, we do not live in a tiny house, but we do keep our lifestyle intentionally tiny in exchange for more time flexibility. So it was just time to make the change to be able to do more of the things that we want to with our time.
Yeah, that's so resonant of a point, because I think for many people, going tiny is about getting ownership and autonomy over their time and what they do with their time. And so it doesn't have to be in a tiny house. You can do this in a small lifestyle, whatever that looks like for you. I often say that tiny isn't square feet, it's values. And so just being intentional about how you're spending your time and your money is half the battle, because lots of people just aren't even thinking about it, right? They're just sort of plodding through the prescribed path in life and upgrading their career and upgrading their house at the expense of their family and their community and the things that are most important to them. So understanding what's important to you and designing your life around it is just the whole essence of, what you and I are here to talk about today. So I too focused on helping people switch their focus from, accumulation of wealth at all costs, and really about accumulation of wealth in order to be generous in life. So what do you think about tiny living, specifically allowing others to give back to their community or whatever their value and impact is that they want to make?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we're talking specifically about the square footage issue and the tiny house itself issue, you get lower insurance costs, less, as you say frequently, less house, less expenses, the insurance, the utilities, there's less furniture to buy. You're less likely to need a housekeeper. I've seen people, they live in, 10,000 square foot homes, and I'm sure it's very comfortable, but that's an awful lot of work. And in order to pay for all of these things, it's more time, more money. Housing expenses also you need to pay for with after-tax dollars. So an additional $1,000 of housing expenses, you might need to be earning $1,300 a month or more. So by paring back those expenses that you're incurring on a regular basis, you have a lot more flexibility. You could pivot your entire career into a different role. Maybe you go work directly in a nonprofit and all of your working hours are giving back to a cause that's really important to you. And you're able to take that pay cut because you've dialed back your expenses. You also could stay in your current role and cut back the number of hours that you're working from 40, maybe part-time, 30, 20 hours. And with that extra time, you're going to be bringing in less income, but you're also going to have more time to be volunteering and doing things that are important to you in your community.
Yeah, those are all great aspects, because giving isn't one size fits all. There's lots of different ways to have an impact. And so, one of the things that obviously comes to mind first for people, and people are likely already doing it if they are kind of charitably inclined, is giving money. So talk a little bit about the specifics on giving money.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's top of mind right now, as we discussed at the beginning here. The Giving Tuesday is coming up. And if you're going to give money, this is actually quite an excellent time to do so. There are a lot of matching incentives. Charities are trying to meet their end of year budgets. There is always a space for giving money. Organizations can't run without paying salaries, supplies for all of the initiatives that they're involved in. It literally helps to keep the lights on. Beyond that, volunteers can be difficult to recruit because so many people are so busy with their lives. And I heard so many times when we were in my prior role discussing what does retirement look like, and so many of those retirees were so excited to have more time to be giving back and volunteering in a meaningful and ongoing way with the causes that had been so important to them and that they had been supporting financially throughout their working years. Now they really had the time to go out, sit down, see eye to eye with the people that they're helping and seeing the impact that they're making in a more tangible way. There's a lot of buzz as well around the potential tax benefits of giving money, which you're not going to recuperate that when you are giving your time. There's not a tax write-off for your time. But I think getting that personal connection and seeing that at the end of the day, that's going to be so fulfilling. And is one of my absolute favorite parts about going out there and getting my hands dirty and doing the work that you just can't replace with even with a large tax deduction. It's just not the same.
Yeah. And I think that it's so important for us to recognize that very often it is the retirees, the people who have more time, that are out doing these volunteer causes. And yet to wait until you're retired to have an impact really is delaying something that could be enriching your life for decades in advance.
Yes.
And so that's where the tiny living and being intentional about your time allows you to have that impact earlier on in your life, which is just so enriching for many decades rather than, sort of putting it off. Everything that we've been sort of programmed to expect is that we get to sort of live our lives when we retire. And wouldn't it be great if we could live our lives a little bit earlier if we just designed a life that allows us to do it?
Completely. That's so beautifully said.
So when you're thinking about giving back, obviously there's just so many organizations out there. I'm, sitting in New Mexico today. I can think of so many different causes in this area that need help. So how do you sort of plug into an organization if you haven't already done so? How do you pick? What do you sort for in order to find one that you're going to focus on? What's your advice there?
Sure. So I think a quick starting place would be the IRS's definition of charity. This is, if you're giving dollars, this is what's going to allow you to take that tax deduction. So from their website, the charitable organizations are religious, educational, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, fostering national or international amateur sports competition, and the prevention of cruelty to children or animals. So that's sort of a lot to digest. We can include that down in the show notes for future reference. But some additional categories in thinking about it in a broader sense and sort of digging into some of what those definitions mean. Poor, distressed, underprivileged people in your community or globally. The creation of public buildings or monuments is something that's not specifically touched on there. Lessening the burdens of the government. These, I think, are a lot of the organizations that you hear about in the community. The soup kitchens, I think, is probably an archaic term, but food pantries and things of that nature. Lessening neighborhood tensions, eliminating prejudice and discrimination, as well as defending human and civil rights that are secured by law. For example, the ACLU. This is nonprofit work that they do. And combating community deterioration, as well as juvenile delinquency. Also thinking through medical outreach to people who are currently incarcerated, the people who are in jail, as well as coming around their families. The options are truly whatever you have a heart for, you're going to be able to find a place to get plugged in. So hopefully this is a helpful place to start to just get the gears rolling, and maybe something sparked something. I would encourage it if you're thinking about looking into a new opportunity, a charity support or volunteer in, write a few of these down and sit with them for a little bit of time and see what is really calling to you and where you would want to be sending your resources.
Yeah. And I think that all of us, or maybe not all of us, but in my experience, there are certain, say, things going on in the world around me that are particularly impactful in my mind, right? I mean, you can hear, if you watch the news, you can hear about lots of bad things happening. But there are certain ones that just really pull at your heartstrings. And so maybe to your point, jotting a few of those overall sadnesses in the world around you that are that really bother you, and then narrowing down from there. So once you've narrowed down a few of those things that you're passionate about or that are really calling to you, what else should you think through before you kind of reach out to organizations?
Yeah, I love this question. I think there are three main sort of decision points that you can think through on your own before reaching out to an organization. And it's going to make your conversation much smoother and more productive for both of you in the long run. The first decision point is to think through what type of work you want to be doing physically. Would you like to be sitting in an office? Would you like to be doing some sort of repeatable manual labor? Maybe you're stuffing envelopes, making phone calls, something that doesn't require too much active, deep thinking. Do you want to be more active with your hands? Do you want to be moving? Do you want to be outside building houses, painting a mural, gardening? Are you really looking for an active involvement? Or are you looking to sort of sit back, relax, and enjoy the air conditioning? The second point sort of ties in with the first, but what sort of mental work are you interested in? Are you searching for something that you can sort of sit back, you can do while you're having a social conversation, maybe with other volunteers? Maybe you're prepping food and you can have conversations while you're dicing, or as I mentioned, stuffing envelopes. Or do you really prefer to utilize your professional or your talents, your skills, your training in more technical work and be plugged in something that maybe you did for your career, or something that's been a hobby of yours for a long time that not anybody can come in and fill that role? So are you looking for sort of a break from what you usually do, or are you looking to really utilize that for the benefit of the organization?
Those are such great points, because maybe volunteers get burnt out if they choose an activity that isn't something that they really love to do. Just like having a job and doing activities in your job that you don't necessarily really love to do.
Yes.
Aligning your volunteer work with what really is sustainable for you for the long term is important.
Yes, certainly. And it's going to make for such a better experience for you and for the organization, because you're probably going to stay in that role for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And then the third decision point is around availability. So what times of the day are you available, and do you want to be available for volunteering? Is it a couple of hours in the morning, lunch breaks, evenings, days of the week? Are you preferring to do something on the weekends or the weekdays? And then even beyond that, what is your sort of maximum availability for volunteering? Is this something that you're wanting to keep to an hour or two a month? Something that you're willing to do 4 hours every week? Or are you looking to jump into a project where you're going to have a heavier time commitment, but it has a more defined period, at which point you'll step out and do something else or switch roles? So having those parameters and boundaries in place in advance, because I guarantee you, however, if you leave it open, then the organization will take as much time as you're willing to give them. As we talked about, volunteers are always in demand. So as much time as you can, they'll take advantage of that. So make sure that it's something that feels comfortable for you and you're not saying yes out of guilt, because again, that can lead to a much healthier long-term volunteering relationship.
Yeah, that's really good. We all have to, if we're going to design a life around maximizing our time and carving that time up between our wage earning work in our family and our community, and then some volunteering, we have to put some boundaries around, those things that maybe will start to creep outside their
Yeah.
scope, right?
Yes.
I have volunteered with so many different organizations over the years. My probably most sort of native calling is around hunger or feeding. I appreciate good nutritious food, and so I did a lot of uh, handing out of food at the food pantry that was near my home in Florida. That was manual work. I appreciated the manual labor because that's what I enjoy doing. I like having some exercise in my work.
Yes,
And
totally.
so that was really good, and something that I felt, just committed to sticking with until that food pantry ultimately closed, sadly. But every time I get myself into a volunteer role where I'm doing sort of administrivia, detail, spreadsheety kind of stuff, is requires more discipline. And even though maybe the skill set is, what I have to do those more detailed work, it's more. I have to really put it time block it on my calendar, because otherwise I will avoid it because it's not my favorite thing to do. So, those are all, really good and important points, is aligning your volunteering with yourself and making sure that you're finding the right fit. It's sometimes, I would imagine, hard to do that though, because there's just so many things. And if you have kind of a, charitable heart and you look around your community, there's just so many different needs, and it's
Oh,
probably easy to dip into one before you have a thorough analysis. So thanks for that framework.
yeah.
So that's definitely a lot to think about, and a really good framework. Once you've identified the worker cause, how do you get connected with that organization? Do you sort of reach out to them and, say, hey, here's my time? How would you approach them?
Yeah, I think if you have a contact, or if you go onto a website, a lot of websites, particularly of larger organizations, will have a spot specifically of how to get involved or work with us, something to that effect. If you're looking for a little bit more of a personal touch, or if you're still really on the fence about what you want to do in general, a local community foundation can be a very helpful resource. I'm here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we have two locally, and in all of the major cities around Ohio that I'm familiar with do have community organizations as well. So they're going to be really plugged in with the nonprofit space. They're going to have personal connections. They're going to know what are the current projects and causes that those organizations are working on, that they're trying to get volunteers in for. So they can be a source of brainstorming and thinking through your decisions. And then once you have identified one that you think you would like to know more about, or have a conversation with, or just jump in, then they can help facilitate that conversation, since you've developed a relationship with them and they have a relationship with the nonprofit. That can be so seamless and help you really get plugged into a spot that's going to make sense, considering all of the decisions that you've thought through, and in the 3 points in your time and the work that you want to do and such. So I think that a quick Google search likely will help you find your local community foundation.
And a community foundation can also help you if you have charitable intent from a financial perspective, right? Because
Yes.
they are skilled in all of the, tax benefits, and, they know all the different mechanisms for giving. And then on an earlier call, I spoke with John Cullum at the American Heart Association. We talked about giving strategies specifically. So if that's something of interest to you, you can go back and check out John Cullum's episode, because we talked about the financial giving from a planning perspective. But community foundations can be an important resource across the full spectrum of your engagement with nonprofits. So besides formal charities and, community foundations, what are some other opportunities to give back to the community?
Yeah, I think when you're not limited to the IRS definition, if you will, you have ultimate flexibility. Removing those parameters really just opens up the whole world. And if you can think it and you can see a need, then go for it. I think a couple of places that you can really see, feel, and enjoy the impact that you're having. One that's pretty common is political organizations. So political donations are not deductible from a tax standpoint, but many people are very passionate, of course, on both sides of every issue for every candidate. So this could look like fundraising for your favorite candidates, for causes that you're passionate about. You could work at the polling places, again, utilizing your time, being there, contributing the man hours that they need, and also just raising awareness for what's important to you. Sometimes that looks like petitions, knocking on doors. When I recently was going to vote, they always have people standing outside last minute handing out leaflets. There are a lot of ways to get involved in the things that are important to you, that are not going to be captured in that sort of tax definition, if you will. And I think really there is so much power in just giving back in your community, helping your neighbor, childcare, lawn care, making a meal. These are things, they're never going to pop up on a tax return. They're not glorious. They're not glamorous. A lot of times they're one-time things. But as I mentioned at the beginning, speaking as a recipient of many of these sort of community favors, the impact is huge. And just stepping in that moment of need and using your free time, your resources, some of these, like making a meal, yeah, you're gonna be contributing a few bucks, a little bit of gas for a lawnmower, if that's what you're choosing to do, but really the way that you can see the tangible benefits of your time and what you're investing in your community, and helping to just really foster that stronger community, the sense of goodwill, and literally helping your neighbor. There's just no replacing it.
Yeah, we have definitely come to a time, at least from my perception, where helping out your neighbor and even knowing your neighbors
Yes.
is not as common as it once was. And yet there is this sort of reciprocity principle that is programmed into us as humans, where when we give help, we receive help. People just naturally reciprocate. And there will be a time in all of our lives where we will need help. And so developing those relationships takes a little bit of intention, and creating relationships within our smaller, micro community, friends, families, neighbors, pays dividends for ourselves in addition to helping those other people. So I think that this is a great focus that has been within the tiny living community. Folks that are in the schoolie space or van life or in tiny homes, there seems to be a resurgence of this neighborly sort of reciprocity going on, which is really heartening to see, because we have become very isolated, it seems like, in our single family ticky-tacky home neighborhoods. And so
Yes.
It's good to see people helping others again. And these are things, to your point, they don't go on your tax return, but they do pay dividends for you in all kinds of ways throughout your life. Do you have any other ideas? Is that kind of it beyond the written tax code, or is there anything else you wanted to point out?
I just think being willing to keep an open mind, open heart, open eyes, looking for opportunities. Where can I get plugged in? Where can I make an impact? How can I make somebody's day a little bit better? And the most important thing is to just get started. sitting on the couch and thinking about all of the decisions that you need to make. And to a point, there's certainly a benefit to making well thought out decisions before overcommitting yourself. But just jumping in, you can always change your mind. If you are involved in an organization for 2 months and you realize it's not a good fit, you're certainly welcome to speak up. And they're still going to be grateful for the 2 months of work that you have given them. You can't take that away. So I think just getting started, picking something and diving right in is really going to be one of the key takeaways. Thinking about the causes and the 3 decisions about how you want to volunteer your time, and reaching out to the local community foundation.
Yeah. Sara, I have another, I guess, learning from my time in different nonprofit organizations. And that is that we have to maintain an awareness that a lot of nonprofits are run almost entirely by volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And so keeping sort of a compassionate awareness for the organization itself, and realizing that it's not necessarily going to be perfectly run all the time, and that there may be some, some personality interferences at times and that sort of thing. Like, just not expecting everything to be, as well run maybe as our best job ever, I think is a good expectation to set for ourselves, because I've gotten into many organizations and the volunteer coordinators that I worked with suddenly disappear, or the board seems like it has a lot of drama going on or whatever. And that's just, I guess, the reality of, humans trying to come together and give their best selves to a cause that they care about, that there will be differences of opinion of how that goes. And, people will come and go. And yet your impact is not lessened or diminished by the fact that there's, less than perfectly smooth operations all the time. And we have to keep sort of in our awareness the fact that we are still having an impact, even if things aren't perfect.
Oh, yes, that is a hugely important point. And so well said. So well said.
So we've covered a lot of really great points here today about kind of how to sort through all the organizations that are out there, how to prioritize how we want to give of ourselves, how to make contact, and what financial tax benefits are in it for us, what other benefits there might be for us, giving to our community or a cause that we care about. Is there anything else that you would like to say as we wrap up?
I think get out there and start doing it. Giving Tuesday is this week. If you've got a few extra dollars, pick one of the organizations that you've been thinking about, write them a check. You'll get on their email list. You'll start hearing from them, and you can start to see what the heart of their organization is all about. You could spread it across a couple of charities if there are a few that you are interested in. But the most important thing is just getting started. As we said, Giving Tuesday is going to be a great time to put your dollars to work. And then beyond that, just staying plugged into the heart of your local community, figuring out what the need is, stepping in and having grace with everybody that you meet along the way. And you're just going to do a lot of good.
Yeah, so good. Well, Sara, make sure that you share with us how people can get in touch with you. Certainly, there will be listeners out there who really want to make sure that they are putting intention in their lives so that they can give back to their community. If they're looking for someone to help them execute on that, how can people find you?
Sure. So the best place to find me is my website, liveandgivefinancial.com. You're also free to send me an email, Sara with no H at liveandgivefp.com. I respond to everything. So I would greatly appreciate helping anybody through any questions that have come out of our conversation today.
Wonderful. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on and talking through all of this in advance of Giving Tuesday. This is such an important thing for folks in the tiny living community, making sure that their dollars are creating the impact that they want while they are on this journey on this planet. So we really appreciate your expertise on the giving piece today.
Yes, Laura, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Less House, More Moolah. To access valuable financial tips and resources tailored to your tiny living journey, join our exclusive community at thetinyhouseadvisor.com. Here you'll find a supportive network of like-minded individuals committed to helping each other navigate the challenges and celebrate the victories of embracing a minimalist lifestyle. So don't miss out on the opportunity to be part of this empowering tribe. Be sure to tune in next Thursday for another insightful episode of Less House, More Moolah, where we'll continue to explore practical solutions and inspiring stories to help you create the life you've always dreamed of.
Please see the show notes for important disclosure regarding the Tiny House Advisor LLC and this episode.